Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and when we think of quilting panels, we think of a large picture on a piece of fabric. Well, there's more than that involved in a panel. We can get panels that are little squares, panels that have small pictures on them, and of course, that very large picture. The panels mean we are buying a portion of that meter or that yard. So we're not buying it by those inches, we're buying it by a panel. And I have a panel that's not one big picture, but it's going to be a fun one to cut up. This is a panel. It has been cut to the size of whatever this picture or whatever the design is inside. The panel sizes do change depending on the picture. So you're buying this portion. You won't be able to buy a couple of inches of this. You have to buy the entire panel. The prices are still the same as you're buying per inch or per yard. It's just that is the size that you need to have in order to get the panels. This particular one is from Benartex. It has 4 large snowflakes, 3 medium, and 6 small. So we're going to be able to cut these out, or you could use it as one entire panel. Benartex has also come out with a free pattern to go with that panel. So we are going to be able to cut up those snowflakes for the center and for 4 corners. So we're going to be able to fussy cut these. This border fabric also is a fabric we're going to be able to fussy cut. For the pattern, we're going to cut the stripe along this area so that it's going to come out. So the dark is going to be around the outside, the lighter is going to be in the inside. And we'll get to that when we get to that last border. So we need the panel, this fabulous striped fabric. We'll need black and 3 other blues. So this entire quilt really is going to look like the name says, Starry Night. So let's start and fussy cut that panel. Before we cut out the snowflakes, it's important that we give this a good press. Any little wrinkle is going to change the size of that square as we are sewing it. So it's important that it's flat before we cut. I do not have an 11-inch square ruler, so I'm going to turn this 12-inch ruler into a template because I do want to see where I want to cut. So you can do this with any size ruler. I'm going to leave the 11 inches and cover that additional inch. So I can use just a piece of paper, and I'm just going to cover that extra inch. It's just going to be enough for me to see without being distracted and not having to do the extra math. I won't be using these for cutting. I just want that center piece at 11 inches. Now I'm going to be able to take this and figure out where it's going to go on my pattern. I'm going to trace the edge with chalk and trace all of the sizes before I cut them out. So I'm just going to use some chalk and mark my cutting lines. And chalk just brushes off. So if it's not correct, I can always change it. With that mark there, I'm going to be able to find that next size that I want and draw that next line. I'm going to do this to divide up this panel just to make sure that it is right. Then I'm going to cut out my shapes. Once those 4 large snowflakes have been cut out, we need to cut out 4 of these small snowflakes, and they need to be at 6.5 inches. With the rest of the snowflakes, we can either make a little table runner or maybe stitch them on the back. The 4 big 11 snowflakes will make that center portion of the quilt. We're going to sew them together to make that big piece. So we're going to need 2 strips at 2 inches by 11 inches. And those will fit right on the ends. And then 1 strip down the center, 2 inches by 23 inches. And those will all match together. When the center's done, we're going to frame it. We'll be framing it with pieces that are 2 inches by 23 inches, and we're going to need that on both sides. And the fabric is a dark black. And then on the 2 opposite sides, by 26.5 inches. And that will go on the top and the bottom. So that black is framing all of those snowflakes. So it looks like a big window pane. Once that centerpiece is done, we're going to work on the borders. The first border consists of 3 strips of fabric, cornerstones, and this triangle that's going to be in the middle. So those 3 borders will make up the first border. We need to start with 3 strips of fabric sewn together, and those strips are 2.5 inches. The fabrics are going from light, medium to dark. So we need to sew these 3 strips together, and then we're going to subcut all of these strips, which will equal 6.5 inches to 13.5 inches. We now have 8 of these units, light, medium, and dark. We need to divide those in half, so we have 4 and 4, and we're going to sew some triangles on the corners. So we will need 4 6.5-inch black squares on each side with lines drawn from corner to corner. We're going to be stitching right along that drawn line, and when we trim this off, we will have those triangles, and we're going to be able to sew them together, and that is giving us that center point. So the light color is at the bottom, and the dark is where this little point is going to go. We will then be able to sew these units together, and we will have 4 long strips. Once we've sewn on that angle, we can cut them apart, and this area is just going to replace that area we cut off. We need to press 1 strip set going in one direction and the other one going in the opposite direction, because we're going to sew these together down the center of that black. If you like to collect scraps, you can always sew these little pieces together and you will have another block, and you can use this for another project. So press 1 pile in one direction and 1 in the other. When you have those seams pressed in opposite directions, you have the one seam going in this direction, the other in this. So they're going to nestle into the corner. It will reduce bulk. And sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I would press the seams open. We now have 4 units with this big triangle in the center. We need to put corners on 2 strips. And the corners are very similar to a log cabin. We have a 2.5-inch square, and that square will match this light fabric. Another 2.5-inch square will match that second strip, and those will get sewn together. 2.5 by 4.5 will get put on to this side. Another 4.5 will go on the top, and a 6.5 will go on the side. So when these are stitched together, this border is going to continue that stripe around the corner. So each of those borders are going to all match up. So it's going to be a continuous line all the way around the corner. So we need to make 4 of these and put them onto the ends of 2 strips. We now have 2 long borders with those extra pieces on the corner and 2 short borders. So those short borders on each side, and then we're going to be able to line up the top and the bottom. And we can see how those lines are going right around the corner. When that border is stitched on, we only have 1 border left, and it's fussy cutting this big print. This stripe fabric, the stripes are running along the length of the fabric. So if we were to cut it from the width, our border would have the stripes going inside. What we're looking to do is fussy cutting these borders, so we're going to take that long length of fabric. We need to cut a 3.5-inch strip. So we're going to cut in the middle and come out. So we're going to need 4 long strips at 38.5 inches. Once we get those strips cut, we're going to be able to add on a 2.5-inch border. When we add that black border on, this black inside really does pop. And what we're looking to do is have this light area inside the quilt. And so that darker is going to be on the outside of the quilt. And we can see right here how that dark really comes right into that dark border. So we're going to open up the fabric and cut going down that length and cut strips at 3.5 inches. When it's all sewn together, you can really see how that pattern appears to be coming inside this darker border. These strips are now 6.5 inches, and we're going to be able to take 2 strips and put the snowflakes on each end. So we will have 2 long strips and 2 short strips, just like we did the first border. These borders are going to match up. The short one will stop at both the top and the bottom. Then when we put on that last border, all of these corners are going to match up. And that fabric really does make it shine from the outside. And when these borders are put on, this quilt top is going to be 50 inches by 50 inches. And that's all that was needed for this quilt. So it looks like there's a lot of borders and a lot going on, but they're very simple straight line sewing. This is a great example of a panel which is not an entire picture that we're able to cut up. And we were able to take that really nice border fabric and cut it on the lengthwise, which gave us a totally different look than if we would have cut it on the width of the fabric. It's definitely a different way of cutting the lengthwise versus the width of the fabric, but it really can make a big difference in a quilt. I'll put a link in the description to the free pattern, and as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe, and as always, come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.